Hello, this is the RPG Crawler, and I don't even know if I'm going to post this. So, I had been made aware of a couple weeks ago this supposed challenge by Sean McCoy. I believe he did Mothership, as well as a few other things. Basically, of designing a mega dungeon a single room at a time throughout 2023, with the end goal being approximately a 12 level dungeon, 365 rooms, and just jotted down. Now, a lot of people are doing them in notebooks. Some people are doing them online in blogs. A lot of content creators that I personally follow have opted not to do this challenge, and I don't blame them because, quite frankly, a content creator has a lot of stuff on their plate already. Some sort of challenge is not going to be very helpful. Some of them, especially around the old school crowd that I basically take a look at, just don't believe that a mega dungeon should be designed one room at a time. They like to have an overall plan for it. I am kind of torn because the way I design mega dungeons, this one's just telling about the philosophy. It's just basically a dungeon room a day every day for 2023 for 365 rooms. Every week is a little room of 7 rooms. He's doing it in a little organizer here with graph paper on it, which is common in some more Japanese journals, and with just simple writing. Simple writing. I, it's recommended in here that you use various generators and such. I tend not to use generators on my dungeons. Uh, Sometimes I do, and I have had decent success making completely random dungeons, but I generally don't use generators myself, mostly because I usually have more ideas than time to put them down on a page. So ideas are usually not my weak point. So that part is going to be out of the way. What I'm going to try and do is I'm going to try this. And there's a pretty solid chance that I do not succeed, because I'm already designing some mega dungeons for my patron game. My patron game is currently running through one called Ruins of Fort Charnel, or actually, that's not the name, it's the Vaulted Chaos Lord, but they're running through the ruins part right now. This is a map of the first level that I'm doing there. I've currently got 5 levels they have access to, including sub levels. I think they're only on to like level 3, or have access to level 3 right now, although there's, as I said, a couple sub levels here and there. As you can tell, I'm not the greatest mapper. I tend to throw things together willy-nilly, and I have some elements of dungeon design that I prefer to use that I am not using in my patron game. This is actually this one that I have on screen right now is the first level of maybe the 3rd mega dungeon that I've designed for a patron game, and the others are already concluded. The big one was a 5th edition one, Grim Fortune Citadel. I may have mentioned it a couple years ago. It's fun. I've actually got some RPG story times coming up that detail the adventures therein, but I designed a much larger mega dungeon than they actually used at the time, because I wanted to go all out because it was a patron game and they spent a lot of time outside of the dungeon. That's all right. That's all right. That's why historically, if you're running a mega dungeon for your group, you tend to want to design only like a level or 2 in advance, if that, because that way, unless you have just boatloads of time, but that way you can adapt it to what your players do. My mega dungeon philosophy is a bit, I don't want to say odd, but it's very particular. So some of the people that even love mega dungeons say that you should vary it up and you should get them out of the mega dungeon from time to time. I don't usually actually. I'm currently in my patron game. I am currently pushing them to explore the mega dungeon, But I don't usually just solely focus on the mega dungeon. Instead, I treat the mega dungeon as I would a city. It is a location where characters can go in a lot of my adventures, and the adventure itself may have ties to the mega dungeon, but it's not like, oh, go here, clear this floor, go to the next one, clear the floor. It's usually you have a very specific reason to enter it and then exit it. So when I design mega dungeons, I kind of, patron game aside, I kind of use a more generic location based idea without tying it to any particular story or anything. So it's going to be an interesting little design this time. I've got a name for it. I've already started the blog. There's literally nothing on this blog, although there will be by the time I upload this. It's called Fortress of the Forgotten Prince. I will put the URL in the description below. There is I currently do have some notes and a single map of the first room. What I'm probably going to do, knowing my schedule, is I may end up doing 2 or 3 rooms in a particular day and then just releasing them over the following days and then catching up again, just because that's usually how my schedule goes. I do not have one of those handwritten organizers. What I do have that I keep on me all the time is my tablet. It's got a nice little tablet. It's like a Galaxy S6 or whatever. I just whip it out and take notes on it anytime for any reason, and it's just basically my day-to-day planner / journal / workhorse for whenever I'm not at my main computer. So that will help me do that. However, I have done maps on it in the past, but I'm not going to do most of the maps for this particular challenge on it. Instead, I am going to hand draw the maps because I just prefer it that way, and I will simply scan in each room as it is done. So for this instance, I already have one room scanned in, and let's zoom in real quick. It is just the entry room, and I'm going to go ahead and give some basic, as soon as I figure out how to zoom in, some basic design descriptions of it. So it is a pretty standard entryway. It's got multiple exits, so you can branch off corridors from it. We've got our entrance down here. And what I've done is I initially concepted this particular room out. I am, and I have mentioned it in the past, a big fan of verticality in dungeons. And I had originally, when I threw this idea together, I had originally concepted this room out, in fact the entire upper floor out, as basically 2 dungeon levels like intertwining with each other, and just go from there, because that would give me all kinds of opportunities to link rooms and such. I decided against that for mapping purposes, because that does make things a little bit more difficult to map. I do, however, have a rather large room. You have I believe 50-foot by 80-foot room. These are going to be 10-foot squares. You've got a stairway that leads down from the entryway. It opens onto a curved staircase that has 2 stairs going down for the rest of the room. I believe I'm setting the room height as a vaulted ceiling, 20 to 30 foot tall. I may adjust that depending on how it looks, with 4 pillars of support in the sides. You've got this double stairway coming down. I decided against putting any doors in the entry room, and that's just a personal choice. A lot of times when I run mega dungeons, I design them with old school in mind, even if I may run them in newer editions. And one of the things about doors is that they tend to make for encounter magnets in older school dungeons, especially when you have a lot of them in one room. I do not want this initial room to have much in the way of encounters, because I want it to be a relatively safe room to be the first room in the dungeon. There's no enemies or anything listed in here. There's going to be no treasure in here. This is just going to be basically the hub. And this is where a party can come down and chat for a while and decide where they want to go. Now, that's not to say that there aren't going to be any encounters here. There will be the option for encounters, but I intend to have, like, I have a very rough idea of this first level of the dungeon. Is I'm going to have a couple different factions in the dungeon, and I'm going to get into those in a little bit. And they're not going to be necessarily allied, and they're not necessarily going to be enemies all the time. There may be skirmishes between them. There may be trade between them. This might be useful as a neutral sort of meeting place. And in fact, they may not even be enemies to the PCs all the time. So that could be something they can work on. We've got a statue here, and I usually put this the other way around. I think I drew this upside down and then flipped it around. You got a statue of a sharp-faced elf. I'll go into the room description a little bit. You've got your 6 exits into different corridors, and then this is a grate, and this is kind of what you have here is a stairway leading down to the next level, and then it's got not a single grate, but rather 2 series of interlocking steel bars. I may do iron bars. They're metal bars of some sort. I may have it in my notes, I may not. But the idea is, and I don't know if anybody's played Skyrim, because it's such a rare game nowadays, but in many of the dungeons, or not many of them, but in a couple of dungeons in Skyrim, you'll have something like these spikes that close off a door, and you'll have another set of spikes that form like a grid. And usually, because it's Skyrim, you've got one lever here and then one lever here, and you pull each one, and then they open the door. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to have this stairway be accessible once you've removed both sets of grates, and I'm going to put the opening to the grates in an as yet undetermined room. There's going to be 2 of them. There's going to be one to either the north-south and one to either the east and west. And you go in there, and you'll be able to turn a crank and open one set of the bars. And then you'll go to the other side and open another set of bars. And that will give you access to the next floor down. This is not going to be the only access to the next floor down. I intend to have maybe 2 or 3 total stairways or other access points down to the next level. This one here is locked because it is the go-to for the next level. That means that once players have explored or done whatever they need to do in this first level to open this gate, then they have the option to proceed down into the next level. Now, that's not to say that somebody may come over and close the gate again, but at that point, they'll know how to open it again. That gives me a couple good resources. That gives you, number one, a way players can see this, and they know that they can see through the gate, and they know that there's stairs leading down. So they know there's an access point down there. They can try to get down there early if they can somehow manage to get through the bars. I think I'm going to set them maybe 6 inches apart, so you'll have little 6-inch by 6-inch grids. So if they have like a way to get a tiny thing down there, they can maybe scout out down there. If it's just a party full of pixies, maybe they can just fly through it. But the important part is they know that this is going to be accessible at some point. They know that they're going to find a way down. And that gives them a shortcut down. And if I ever need, like once they've explored the first level, but I would like them to revisit a particular point on the first level, I can always place what I need them to revisit between this room and wherever they need to unlock the gate again, and just have that particular part of the gate closed. So if I need them to, say, go to a room in the north, or if I want them to go to a room in the north, I can put an encounter there that they need to talk to. Maybe it's, there's a bunch of reasons for it. Maybe, it's like an NPC that they need to talk to that it would be unreasonable to find them on a lower level. Maybe they come in on a mission to find something and it just happens, to be something more suited for the first level. Maybe they have a few deaths and have some lower level people with them that may not survive well on lower level in the lower levels of the dungeon, and I want them to have a few encounters on the top level, I could go ahead and just close one of these gates, have an encounter set up here, or have multiple encounters set up there, and then they have to go unlock the gates again, and there's the reason for being on the first level again. There's a couple things you can do with that. I like this first room. I would have liked to have done the whole second level thing where you have like a balcony up here, so you have more corridors impacting it. But again, this is just going to be a quick map kind of thing. So the last thing I would like to go over is the notes that I have for the first room and the first level of the dungeon kind of together. Let's see if I can do it. Yes, I can. All right. So what I have is basically a copy of the file I have on my system. So there's some mention in there that you're only designing rooms. So let's take a look at the room. I've got just a quick description here. It's not even a proper box text. It's just information on what I just covered. And I'll get to that in a sec. What I have here is a basic encounter table for level 1. What I have here are the various factions that I worked out for level 1. And right here I have a basic background. So basic background is just the bare minimum needed to justify the dungeon's existence. Usually you can get away with just a paragraph. Some more popular published mega dungeons go on and on and on for page after page after page of information on the dungeon itself. I'm not necessarily going to do that right now. I may flesh it out later, but I just wanted something very specific. So what I've got is a long ago prince, lived millennia ago, just your standard princely wizard. He goes into a kind of he's not first in line or second in line for the throne, so he has no real hope of ever getting it. I have set it so that he doesn't, as far as anybody knows, he never wanted the throne. He goes out, he builds himself a structure, he builds himself a stronghold, and I don't mention whether it's above ground or below ground. It's just a stronghold where he could practice his magic, he could get things done, and not be bothered. And then I leave it vague as to what happened. Some say his elder brothers sought out his power to assist in their ambitions, which resulted in devastation that shattered their nation. Since it was millennia ago, it'll be out of the context for most of the characters. Some say that he turned against them first, forcing them to wage war upon their stronghold. I leave that vague. So it's not an evil wizard in a dungeon. What it is, it's a dungeon created by a wizard that may or may not be evil, can be morally ambiguous or whatever, but something terrible happened, and now this ruin has basically been either rediscovered or has simply been uncovered, and the tunnels that had been locked away have become a breeding ground for monsters. They've become a bolt hole for thieves and bandits, that sort of thing. And that opens the opportunity for all kinds of lead-ins and quest hooks and so forth. What I'm personally going to do is, and I don't have the quest hooks listed here, and I'm probably not going to because that's not part of the challenge, at least not immediately. When I have time, I'll go into them. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to have several quest hooks that get players in immediately, and then, a good DM is going to be able to put people in over and over again based on various things. One of the initial quest hooks I'm going to have is I've got an idea that some sort of thief comes and robs something, maybe a container from a merchant, maybe a trinket from the local lord, then goes into the dungeon, so the players basically have to go in, track them down, and recover it. Their purpose is not to clear the dungeon. It's to go in, to find a thief, to retrieve a stolen item, and then to get out again. And that gives you a very clear in find it, and out. And they may decide to go room to room, but that's not on me. That's on them. For the basic factions on level 1, I have them set up not necessarily as bosses or whatever, although I do have a couple things listed that are maybe a boss level. I've basically got 4 factions. Some people, this also gives an idea of what sorts of creatures you can find in the dungeon, at least in level 1. Some people will pick from random tables. Some people will have an idea of what they want. Some people will just pick whatever creatures are in a theme. I picked what I felt was a good challenge for first to second to possibly third level characters. It really depends on what edition that you're running it in to see how challenging these things are. So, of the 4 factions, 2 of them are simply goblin tribes. Each one specializes in a different sort of tactics. One uses kind of traps and ambushes like you'd expect of kobolds. I don't intend to put kobolds in this dungeon, at least not in the first level. Want to get away from that, but I will be using goblins. One of them uses traps and ambushes, so you may see them try to spring traps down corridors. One of them uses cruel tactics, and for cruel tactics, I'm going to be doing things like just goblins that are prepared, like mixed rank goblins with spears and maybe ranged weapons in the back, or goblins that will unleash monsters, or goblins that may use burning oil, just kind of the nasty sorts of goblins to deal with. One thing about using cruel tactics is, yes, sometimes they may go ahead and coup de grace somebody that's unconscious or something like that. Neither of these goblins are ones that you want to deal with. Furthermore, I don't necessarily know. They may start out neutral to each other. I think they're going to start out quarreling with one another. So each of these goblin groups is going to have, I've already put it down here in the encounter mix down here, that you've got a 50-50 chance of encountering each tribe. That'll inform you not only on what they do, but if later on, let's say you encounter another encounter while you're already fighting some goblins, which can happen in old school stuff, especially if they're making a lot of noise during combat. You may be fighting some Grimfell goblins, and then some Jagged Blade goblins will come in, and they may decide that it's time to deal with those Grimfell, so you'll get like a 3-way fight going on. So that sort of thing can happen. The other 2 factions I have are Throg the Brute, which is an ogre, and he's basically got orcs that serve him. He's not looking to take over the world. He's not looking to do a lot of just real nasty stuff. What he's looking to do is he's looking to live in the dungeon and extract a toll from travelers. Now, does this mean that he's going to kill and rob them? Maybe. But any way he can get money is good with him. I may make him just smart enough to realize that if instead of killing the party, he simply has his people, and this applies to any orc group found on this level, they may, instead of trying to kill the party, they may just simply say, where's your passage tax? Where's your toll? And as long as he gets his cut of the money, he does not care what happens. So they may, parties being what they are, they may decide that they're tired of that. Sometimes they may decide that it's a good deal, especially if they're wounded and coming back out. And he may be somebody they can deal with, even though he's chaotic and kind of dumb. The last part here is the Cult of the Black Boar. It's a small group of cultists under the influence of an imp. I've used imps as an effective, low-level, and yet very evil kind of boss creature in the past. What can imps do? Well, they can't smash you. They can't necessarily do a lot of crazy damage. But what they are is they're intelligent. They're survivable in most editions. Less so in 5th edition, but in most editions they're very survivable. And they can change shape. So generally what I have an imp doing is just what they're doing here, is they'll go ahead and influence somebody. A lot of people prefer to use imps as like familiars or the underling of a larger boss, and I haven't decided yet. This imp that's masquerading as whatever demon or whatever devil runs this cult, he may be the servant to somebody else, but it's not going to be the servant to somebody in the first level. They may be an underling to another diabolical group down in lower levels. That's an option for future reference. All of this, none of this took very long to figure out. The idea is to leave myself options. Both goblin tribes, they don't say one of the goblin tribes on level 1, they say one of the goblin tribes in the upper levels. That means for level 2 and such, I have options. So it's all about expandability in the future. And then finally, well, I will discuss the grand entry here, but finally I'll go over the encounter table. I use a 2d6 encounter table. It has a statistical bell curve that puts your common and your uncommon, or your common encounters here, your uncommon encounters here, and then your rare encounters here and here. So what I have a list of things, and I will probably make notes on each of these encounters. None of these encounters are unique, but all of them are tied either to things that I have in the dungeon so far or things that I intend to put in the dungeon. Adventuring party, I may throw together some sample adventuring parties, or I may just say use your own adventuring party. It's going to be another level 1 adventuring party. They may be allies. They may be rivals. They may be outright foes, depending on how you want to do it. This just means that another group of humanoid adventurers has come upon the party, and you get to deal with it from there. Lizard folk. Now, there is no lizard folk faction up here, and lizard folk are a little bit tougher than your normal level 1 creatures. They're usually considered level 2 creatures or whatever. I have the intention to have some sort of dark elf, minor dark elf group down in the lower levels. Not your typical drow, but maybe a couple, like a handful of bandits or something. They may be involved with the initial theft that I used to set up the dungeon. They may just be there, as another bandit faction, and they're going to be using a tribe of lizard folk as their paid mercenaries, or basically their hired muscle. So these lizard folk are not necessarily going to be hostile. They're going to be there. There may be some confusion. They may be on their way down to the lower levels. They may be on their way up. Either way, it's just an obstacle. The party can encounter them and move on. Your orcs are probably going to be associated with Throg the Brute. Throg the Brute is going to have his orcs wanting to extract a toll from travelers, not necessarily kill them, but maybe say, hey, where's your money or whatever. After a few tries, if the party may decide to wipe them out, they may just decide to attack the party eventually. If the party deals with them on a regular basis, eventually even like one orc may just be wandering down the hall and try his luck. Even later on, be like, yeah, Throg wants his cut of whatever you came upon. So it'll be interesting there. I have zombies, and then I also have skeletons on here. These are going to be remnants of the dungeon as a whole, like the ancient, the older magics, the just the accrued detritus of things that have happened over the years. Is going to be zombies and skeletons wandering in the hall. There's going to be a loose association with the undead and the Cult of the Black Boar. Not necessarily because the Cult of the Black Boar has anybody that can actually, animate dead. But what they can probably do is muster one or two priests that can control these guys. So there may be some loose association there, but it's not going to be really evident. It's not going to be something that pops up. I'm going to have giant rats because every dungeon needs various, random neutral creatures. I would have loved to put another random neutral creature on here. It just didn't work out that way. I could have replaced these bandits, and these bandits are going to be non-faction aligned either. They may be mercenaries that work for Throg or one of the goblins or even the cult, or they may just be bandits that came in out of the rain and are just using it as a temporary base. They're not going to be associated with a major faction, but they're going to be down there. I would have loved to have another neutral style creature. It's hard to find neutral style creatures that are not overly challenging and yet suitable to put in a dungeon. Like, there's a lot of things like spiders, snakes, that sort of thing. But I'm intending to run this dungeon in an old... If I do it all, I'm intending to run it in maybe a BX or like a AD&D style retro clone or whatever, which means that your spiders and your snakes and such are going to be one-hit kills for a lot of people. So they're going to be... This poison is just rough in those editions. So I try to limit its appearance, at least until I get a good sense of the party. Now, my patron game may be saying, "Oh, you throw poison creatures at us all the time." Yeah, my patron game usually runs really dwarf heavy, so I'm more comfortable running. You know, you have to adapt your dungeon to who you play or who you play with. They tend to run dwarf heavy parties. Those dwarf heavy parties tend to be resistant to poison. I don't usually have a problem throwing poison at things that are resistant to poison. But I do, when I'm just running it for a generalized group, I will tend to dial back on the poison, at least until they're second or third level. And then, one shot all the way. Here we have our goblins. You got a 50-50 chance. If the party goes through the dungeon and makes headway against one or both of the tribes of goblins, I may cut that, may modify that over time. And then you've got, as I said, the bandits, the skeletons. You've got the cultists, the black boar. They're just mostly going to be normal humans or maybe one or two priests. I may have to detail that out a bit. But they'll basically be moving back and forth between their particular area or whatever. Then the last two bear special mention. Number one's a dark elf. As I said, I intend to do like a minor group of dark elf bandits or something on the second floor. This dark elf's basically going to be either A, returning to or going from their base on the second floor, or B, trying to deal with one of these other groups. And I may put that information in there. Either way, the dark elf that they encounter, there's only one, is probably not going to be interested in a head-on encounter. They may spot a dark elf in the hall. If the party is very wounded or something, that dark elf might try to take something, or they may just try to leave and then report to someplace else. Now, the ghoul bears another special mention. One ghoul, a single ghoul. That's not incredibly challenging. What I'm intending to do is make this kind of like similar to the dark elf, where the ghoul may spot them and may not immediately go after them, but it may shadow them. It may hunt them for a while. It may like scoot around, run away. As they see the ghoul sees them, ghoul runs away. Okay, so then they either chase it down, and chasing through tunnels is fun. Or they may say, okay, good, he ran away, and they continue on their way, and then the ghoul basically will try to follow them, wait for them to sleep, wait for them to be wounded or whatever, and basically as soon as they get this encounter, and it's a rare encounter for that point, they're going to have a ghoul stalking them unless they do something about it. So this is going to be one of those encounters to think of. This is why I don't usually put a lot of detail. Like you'll notice in 5th edition, often nowadays, at least the Wizard of the Coast books, they'll put like the details of each individual encounter. And some old school like OSR stuff has started to do that as well. I will probably do something like that for this encounter table. So that's my encounters for level 1. It's just a strict thing. Now here we go with a grand entry. This is not boxed text. This is just something to give the DM, an idea of how to describe it. You've got tall vaulted ceiling, ornate double staircase curving down, archways leaving out. That statue that was right below the, staircase, is that of a sharp-featured elven man, and I have in notes Aladdin, which is the builder of the dungeon, in ornate robes, and he's going to be staring at that staircase, like he's going to be under, like the stairs from above are going to come down around him, and he's going to be standing up there staring down at the entry to the lower staircase floor, or the lower staircase. And then the rest is just a description of that grate. 2 sets of perpendicular bars form a grate. I want to say like 6 inches across. 6 inches across between bars. Barring entry into the lower staircase from the floor. The bars may be drawn back by 2 wheels further in the level. And once I have the level more detailed, I'll go ahead and come back and make note on this that it is, rooms whatever and whatever. I don't have that planned out far enough. I just have that ideas. So, yeah, so far it's pretty straightforward, simple start. Just going by my... A lot of this is going to be going by my instinct. I'm going to have a lot of empty rooms. But empty rooms does not necessarily mean, featureless. Some of them might be. But even in my empty rooms, I might have, I may have, and hold on a second, I would love nothing more than to be able to switch scenes without this thing just scaling up all the time. But yeah, even empty rooms, I may have something like you see here where you've got statues, you've got decorations, you've got columns or whatever. Empty simply means empty of standard encounter. That gives you an opportunity to make rooms for characters to rest. That gives you opportunities to move encounters from other places and set up a more tactical map. But pretty much there's going to be a lot of empty space in this dungeon. I want to say like maybe 1 out of 3 rooms is 1 out of 3 or 1 out of 4 rooms is going to have some sort of encounter, treasure, or puzzle or whatever in it. So that's going to be a lot of relatively empty space. Now my patrons may be going, "Whoa! You put a lot of creatures in the dungeons you make for us." My design for Mega Dungeons for my patron games differs from my design for Mega Dungeons in general, simply because of a couple factors. Number one is that they're paying for the privilege of playing, so I don't want to bore them. Number two is that it gives more opportunity for them to get experience and loot. And number three is that it saves time on my part. And that last part is purely greedy on my instance. Saves time on my part. I can do a couple maps and stock them encounter heavy, and then they'll revert down to a normal like 1-3 or 1-4 whatever ratio after they're cleared. But that buys me time basically, because it's going to take them a month or two, maybe more of game time. I run my patron games twice a week, so that's 8 encounters or 8 sessions roughly a month. So if I can make a level of a dungeon last a couple months, that is good for me. This one, I'm not going to be beset by that. So there's that. Anyway, I don't know if I'm going to do any more videos on this. I'm probably going to be doing videos on general dungeon design going forward. But let's see how far I get in Dungeon23 before I just completely drop the ball. Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up here. This has been the RPG Crawler. Thank you for watching. If you like what you see, remember to leave a like, comment, your feedback, and subscribe for more RPG content. Until next time, take care and goodbye.
And if you are still watching, I would like to take the opportunity to thank my supporters, the top tiers of which are listed on the screen, without whose support I would not have been able to offer the variety of content that I have on this channel throughout the years. If you're feeling particularly generous and would like to join them, you can support the channel. There are a variety of options to do so. I have a Patreon, a Subscribestar, as well as channel memberships enabled. If you are not in a position to contribute, simply leaving a like, a comment, or sharing my videos are all wonderful ways to help the channel grow without spending a dime, and are all greatly appreciated.